Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everybody? It's a little bit crisper in the air. I love it, don't you? Yeah, I think my brain works better when it gets cold. All right, how about a hand for our band? They were wonderful. And Jennifer. You know, one of the lovely parts of this teaching is that we tend to facilitate an understanding of what's going on in the world from a much bigger context than what we see on the news, reading the newspaper, on the internet, because our collective unconscious is always working. And you and I and every human being has within our makeup an evolutionary driver and the evolutionary principle. And that evolutionary principle and driver is constantly prompting us to move the whole thing forward. Dar, is there something I need to know?
No, keep talking.
So today I want to talk about something that is huge, but not talked about too much. We are seeing the effects of it in the world, and the reason I'm speaking about it is because it is a spiritual religious problem. So before I begin, I want to get your agreement that you will open your ears, open your mind, and not think of what I'm saying to be exclusively about men and women, male or female. I'm talking about the divine feminine today in the context of how much it has been missing in our religions and our culture. So, Mrs. God is the name of my talk. You know, even Santa Claus has a feminine counterpart, Mrs. Claus, right? The elves make the toys, and Santa Claus gets all the credit for giving them away. And I don't know what she does. Maybe she makes cookies. But she's in the background for sure. Mrs. God has no place in our awareness either, for the most part. She's been missing from our construct of the universe forever. And our construct of the universe is how we decide what to do and how to behave. So it's very important. Now, she is rising in our collective unconscious. A couple of years ago, I heard a Jungian analyst speak, and he said, I am having the most interesting experience with my patients. More and more of them are having the same dream. And the dream is of a black woman emerging from the ocean, the Black Madonna, which you see all over Europe. And Matthew Fox, great Matthew Fox, who wrote Original Blessing and the Coming of the Cosmic Christ, he said, you're also going to see all over, and that you see it in Europe a lot, the green man. Remember the green man that you see in gardens? It's a symbol of real masculinity. Not toxic masculinity, which is missing the feminine. So these things are coming up, is the point. Out of our collective unconscious, they're beginning to emerge into our awareness. Another great metaphor for what happens if you leave her out is Madame Pele, who is the goddess of Kilauea on the big island of Hawaii. And boy, is she pissed off. And has been spewing hot lava out for a couple of years now, ever since I left in 1980, actually, but lately. But she's creating new land, right? Okay, so it's just a metaphor, and it isn't surprising then that male-dominated religion, God as he, created male-dominated societies, patriarchy. I may have quoted Brother David Stendhal-Rast before. He's a Christian monk, beautiful old guy now. He must be 90 now. And he's just a wise man. And he said, we have created everything in the image and likeness of remote masculine power up on top. Governments, medicine, education, families. It's been Father knows best forever. Exclusively to our detriment. Our own Constitution, which said all men are created equal, said all men and not women for a reason, because when that was written, women were not considered fully human. They were called creatures. And that was in Canada too, and they just took that off the books a few years ago when someone discovered it was still on there, right? Women couldn't own property, they couldn't vote, they weren't fully human. This stuff runs really deep, is what I'm getting at. So I'm not being facetious. This is our world right now. So God as man in the sky, David Ross said, is a theological construct that has nothing to do with how people experience God, and especially monks. And he said, the monk knows God to be the more, but not the separate. Absolutely. And also a perfect equality of feminine and masculine, which has to be present for a life to happen. So the dearth of the feminine perspective in so much of our lives has caused the imbalance we see in the world today. And the Hopi Indians call it koyaanisqatsi, a life out of balance, and it certainly is. We see it in nature, we see it everywhere. It has resulted in wars and famines and diseases and the subjugation of women throughout the world, the mistreatment of those who do not look like white male images of power. But there's some good news. You know, in the midst of all of this, the greatest change that could ever happen to humanity is starting to happen. And all great change, like the volcano, it's pretty messy. Chaos is not comfortable because the power shifts. But there will always be a place for reverence, devotion, the worship of the unseen, of the invisible. We're talking about institutionalized religious thinking that has to change. Jean Houston, the great Jean Houston, what a brilliant human being. She said, every age says this is the most important time humans have ever lived in. And she said, they were all wrong, it's now. And I believe that's true. This is critical where we are right now. And that's why this teaching is so important. This teaching is on the cutting edge of science and wisdom. So the good news is it's all changing, and the rise of the feminine is a necessity if we're to save our planet and our species from annihilation. It's that serious. Okay, so the Me Too movement. That's uncomfortable. Nobody likes it, but all that stuff was hidden for so long. It's just an indication. It's another example of the rise of the feminine power and the necessity for it to be heard and to be embraced and listened to. And she's saying, and I'm thinking about this metaphorically as well as literally, I will not be imprisoned by the system any longer. I won't be, God is saying, all of me needs to be used by you. All of me, or it, or whatever. All of what we perceive the source of life needs to be accessed and available. Not part of it, all of it, okay? So what does this kind of shift do to people? So it creates a temporary chaos as the new order is pushing through, like Kilauea creating new land. But if we think of it as only men and women, we're going to miss the whole possibility here. We're not talking about men and women. We're talking about all of us. The prison guard is as much a victim of the system as the prisoner is. They are both robbed of their wholeness in those roles, okay? So this is as much about liberating men who have developed their own feminine and are in balance because they have taken the heat too. So I'm thinking of Jimmy Carter, the Dalai Lama, the Pope, the new Pope. You're beginning, and then there's more, Gandhi. You can see this balanced perspective they have on things. They see with the eyes of their full power. And that's what's needed in the world. That's needed in us. So the big shift will come as old religious ideas are updated. And there will always be a place, as I said, for spiritual practice and devotion and reverence and all of that. But one of the biggest shifts is how we're going to image it. Now, here's what New Thought brings into it, and this is what we are. We relate to spirit or God as intelligence and love. in a perfect right relationship to create the universe and everything in it. Intelligence and love, and that's both. It's in every sentient life. It's in everything. They have to be together to create. All right, so it's formless potential. Now, it isn't easy to think of a power as formless. But as a matter of fact, we do it all the time. Well, what about electricity? You can't see it. You just see what it does if you use it correctly, right? And on gravity, you can't really see it. It's a very big power. But we know how we interact with it, and we can even manage it to an extent to transcend it. So it's very important for us in this teaching especially to try to think of God as a formless energy, power, being, presence. It is present, and you feel it in deep meditation. When you're in meditation, you feel the presence, and it might just be a flooding sense of well-being. In meditation, we call it the happy for no reason response. You're just happy for no reason. That's God. You're feeling the presence of the more, as David Rass said. So we're going to look today at a couple of aspects of masculine and feminine that are so necessary to create a whole. If we are to experience our spiritual wholeness, and that is going to be the beginning of changing life for everybody. Okay, so the masculine aspect of my mind and your mind is the one that wants to discover and invent and build. It's initiative. It's creative. If it's devoid of the feminine, however, it becomes conqueror. It becomes crash and burn, steal and destroy, oppression. It becomes self-serving to the point of oppression of other people. It reminds me, well, I'll tell you that in a minute. The feminine is relational. So she wants to make sure everyone's included. And in any decision, she wants fairness and justice and equality. She sees into the future. But without the masculine to act, she might remain too local, too tribal, too subjective, ignoring the great benefits of technology, for example. But when you put those two things together, great ideas and a vision of the big picture, you've got something. And every one of us has that within us, and every one of us needs to put it together because one tempers the other. They are equally necessary. So as a species, we can be so far beyond where we are now. I mean, I've heard other people say this. I heard Gene Houston say, we should be so far beyond where we are now. But we have been hamstrung by one little metaphor, the Adam and Eve story. It's a metaphor. I saw on Facebook, but they showed pictures of Adam and Eve, you know. It said, you notice they both have belly buttons? So where do they come from? Who are they? You know, it's like, okay. And there's no scar on Adam where they took her out of his rib. I'm telling you, this stuff is just ridiculous. And this is serious because Eve has been blamed for everything that's negative in life. And I love Joseph Campbell. I may have said this before, but Bill Moyers was talking to him about the Adam and Eve story, and Bill Moyers said, oh, so that really led to the subjugation of women. That's why women have been so oppressed. And Campbell says, yeah, and we've been pretty hard on snakes, too. That's so true. So now here's the deal, guys. We're not talking about you, okay? We're talking about us. So Eve has been blamed for everything that Adam feels he can't control, and that includes his sexuality. He blames the woman for being a temptress. You see this all the time. Like some idiot said Katrina was caused by girls gone wild. A lot of stuff is being blamed on women right now, some of the worst stuff in the world. So she's a slut or she's a whore. But she becomes responsible for her own rape. Now, yeah. In the Middle East, the rapist never gets punished, but the woman gets killed, stoned to death, or her own family will shoot her, kill her, whatever they do to her. Why am I saying that? Because it's a religious belief that's underneath it. This is what has to change. This is why this teaching is so cutting edge. It gets rid of all that stuff. Okay, so what do you do with a temptress? You put a burqa on her. You know, we're not too far from that, ladies, when they start taking away our rights. A lot of talk about how women dress and it's their fault and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so a burqa is a heavy blanket with a little slit with like little grating. She cannot go out into the world without wearing that. In this world, right now, that's happening. That's shocking to me. It's so backward. It comes from religious beliefs that woman is the problem. Okay, so I know it's not easy to look at this stuff, but it's so rooted in religious ideas that those of us in New Thought cannot ignore it. Men are shamed for revealing the feminine in themselves. They're called sissies or wimps. Listen, this is the one that cracks me up the most. Do you know, okay, think about young football players, beautiful young guys, athletes, and they make a touchdown, and they start dancing, you know, and doing all this. Do you know they get fined for doing that now? That's outlawed now. You know why? Because it's feminine to dance. It's not manly. It's not sportsmanship. No, I'm serious. You can track all this stuff back to this. And that just amazes me. So I posted a Hawaiian saying the other day. It goes, "Waiho ka hila hila maka hale e hula." And it means, leave the shame at home and dance. Men, women have been trying to get men to dance with them forever. And we love guys that dance because we know they're more in balance in some way, or not afraid to dance. That would be good dancers. Just get up and move, right? And men do dance in many cultures, but usually with each other in a group. The women are off somewhere. So this enormous shift is about equality. It's about justice. It's about self-responsibility. It's about personal empowerment. But even in us, there's work to do to stay in that vein of wholeness. Be aware, be aware. Sometimes we get so far into one or the other side of our nature that we get out of balance ourselves. You know, when I first came into this teaching in 1975, I was a young, single, divorced mother of 2 children with hardly any money, and I worked 40 hours a week, but still didn't have no child support, blah, blah, blah. I was so awash in my feminine nature. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't think my way out of this problem I had created for myself. I had so much feeling that I couldn't debate anyone about anything because I'd start crying. And it's not unusual. And then I learned to meditate. And my mind started getting in balance. And I started thinking and reading old philosophy books and all kinds of things. And things started evening out. Things started getting better. And then I discovered this teaching. And this all happened within 2 months when I made a demand and said, I don't know where you are, God, but I want you back. And this is what I got. I got meditation, and I got this teaching, which is perfect for me. But that's that kind of balance. You notice when you're off, okay, and pull it back. And sometimes you just need to know about the law, the principle. It's done unto us as we believe, and we start looking at our beliefs. And sometimes you just need to feel the presence, right? But that's it. That's in all of us, masculine and feminine. We need both. Okay, so we hear a lot in this teaching, and this has been a big soapbox thing for me. You're always hearing New Thought people talking about the head and the heart and how the head needs to go away and the intellect is such a problem and we just need to feel everything. What they're really saying is we need more feminine in our decision making, more value for the feminine in our decision making. But the head, the intellect is not the problem. One of our ministers who was president of the whole organization talked about his experience coming into it. And he said something that I think is a great tagline. If you ever want to, your friends say, what's it about in your center where you go? He said, it healed my heart without insulting my intellect. You need both, right? Okay, so the head and the heart are the masculine and the feminine that every human being has in equal measure, and you can't leave out either one of them if you're going to enter into any kind of transformational equation. It reminds me of the old Native American tradition, where the men would gather in the lodge or the tent, the teepee, and they'd smoke the pipe, and they'd talk about whether they should go to war or whether they should hunt or whether they should, what they should be doing. But they never made a final decision, because after they talked and smoked the pipe, they called in the women. And the women came in and gave them the big picture. 7 generations. How will this affect the land if we do this? How will it affect the animals? How will it affect the children who are not yet born to us? And the men wisely listened, and they took everything into consideration before they made the final decision. That's what we're meant to do as individuals and as a culture. But our culture has completely left the feminine out of it because money. Because they're motivated by profit and not by the advancement of the species. You can have both. You can have both. Okay, so if we want positive change in our life and in our world, we have to be operating from our wholeness. And this is not a new idea. It runs through the writings of Meister Eckhart, who was back in the 11th century, the mystic. He was an extraordinary thinker. It's just been buried. It's in most spiritual literature. It's just been buried. So here we are, women learning to bring out their masculine without becoming like the old model of power. That's what happened to a lot of women. I think of Margaret Thatcher, who kind of got burned for it, but she had to act like men to get where she was, kind of thing. There's a way to do it. This is why so many women are running for office right now. Vote this week, whoever you vote for, but do vote. I love voting. I just think it's the greatest thing in the world to be able to vote. So men are learning to allow the feminine to have her say without fearing they will appear weak or too soft. Men learning that women are their equals in every way that counts. But we each bring something necessary and essential to any meeting. So I'm going to leave here today with some words beginning with intelligence and love as a way to think about the source of all life and to think about our personal makeup, vision and reflection. Great idea, let's think about it. Let's step back and let's think about how it would affect other people. Branches and roots, all together in one package, you and me and all sentient life. One beautiful revealing of the formless potential that we are. I'm going to close today with something I wrote for my grandsons when they were little boys. They're now grown men. And they weren't involved in this teaching. They asked me, well, what is it what do you think about God? So I wrote this. At the time, they were like 5 and 8 or something. God is being us all. The fantastic, the foolish, the fair, and the frumpy. The willful, the cheerful, the fit, and the lumpy. It's the wizard, the wise ones, the completely clueless. It's the Dalai Lama and Jerry Lewis. It's all of the Hiltons, Paris and Nikki. It's the far distant planets and Michael and Ricky. God is the toothless old crone sitting alone. It's the billionaire Saudi perched on his throne. It's the victim, the victor, the master, the slave. It's the winner, the loser, the timid, the brave. God is Bush and it's Buddha. It's Krishna Rama. It's Oprah and Opie, OJ and Obama. It's the homeless old man or the GQ designed one. And over in Hawaii, it's Da Kind One. God is Gandhi and King and the ideas that spark them. It's tycoons and their limos and the guys who park them. God is Einstein and Jesus and the shy country bumpkin. It's little green apples and the world's largest pumpkin. God walks with a limp or it runs like a cheetah. It goes to bed hungry or it gorges on pizza. It's everywhere present, all at once, all the time. It's the writer and reader of this little rhyme. What it does is become the only begotten. It loves being all the good and the rotten. For what God does is judge not by appearance, nor is it tempted to run interference. Whatever we vision with our clearest of eyes, God will become supersized. No judgment involved, not a word of reproach. God is happy to fly first class or coach. It follows our lead and says, yes, my beloved, come play this game. I've got you covered. Absolutely. So it is.